Hi everyone and welcome to another live video AMA. My name is Amandine Flachs and today I am happy to be back for another live stream. Every 2 weeks I used to interview early stage startup founders, talk about the journey, invite them to come to my place, play video games and more importantly answer your questions live. But due to the current situation, we had to change a bit our plans, which gives us a great opportunity to interview people who are not based in London, but also people who are working directly with founders, additionally to be founders themselves. So over the past few years, I have been asked many times about how to work with a development studio, how to start outsourcing part of your MVP or part of your product. And today, to talk about this topic, I am joined by James Murphy, the co-founder and CEO of Squid40. So right now we are live on many platforms, including YouTube, Twitch, LinkedIn Live and Twitter Live. So whatever platform you're using, please do join the discussion, come say hi, and also ask your own questions anytime for James. I'll make sure to pass them on as soon as I spot them. So James, happy to have you today. How are you doing?
Hi, Amandine. Yeah, morning. I'm good, thanks. Yeah, good in general. Weather's okay. Happy to be here, and thanks for inviting me on.
No problem. It's a real pleasure, and I wanted to talk about this topic for quite some time now because it's something that comes regularly, and it's good to have this opportunity to do it now. So you're not based in the UK, and so that's why I was mentioning also the fact that it's a good opportunity because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to interview you, especially on such a short notice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But let's start by the beginning. Can you tell us a bit more about you, your own background, and also Squid40? What does Squid40 do?
Sure. Yeah. So I am the CEO and co-founder of Squid40. We are a London HQ'd Romanian delivery-based product studio. I got here through a kind of fairly diverse journey, I suppose 20 plus years of commercial experience, starting at very senior search and selection in the city for financial institutions and professional services. Moved quite quickly into my own tech startups, kind of looking at disintermediating the market, and then the last 10 years have been spent around digital product, working initially for some of the best experience agencies in London as a kind of head of people and operations, and then moving more towards actual product. And the last 8 years, I suppose, I've been really embedded in the London and global startup scene, helping founders build sustainable teams and products. And the last 5 years, really, I've concentrated more on digital product with the culmination of having a studio here in Romania for about 5 years that builds digital products and predominantly now for startups and early stage businesses. Yeah, so that's how I got.
Okay, great. So before I start jumping into all the questions that I have, I would like to know more about any misconception you would like to address, or I think that you would like to address first. Is there anything that people need to know when we talk about outsourcing or going through a studio to develop your product before I start diving into my own questions?
There's quite a lot of misconceptions when it comes to outsourcing product. So I think we at Squid40, and we're not unique in any sense in terms of outsourcing, but the partnership level and the kind of ethic that you have with founders or heads of businesses to build product. Outsourcing is a very wide term, and nearshoring is a form of outsourcing, and nearshoring is very much seen as a word where it's cheap resource and the quality level is low. And so I think people don't understand just purely through not having had the information what partnership-based outsourcing looks like. Most people automatically assume, for instance, that we're just a a development house, i.e. we just have developers, and that couldn't be further from the truth. We're a design-led, design thinking, UX-led house. And so I think people don't understand what's possible. And that's just, misconception for early stage people, early stage founders, as well as, SME owners and CEOs. So yeah, it's outsourcing is one thing, and there are different terms within that. And I think people don't understand what that actually means. Yeah, I think those are the misconceptions.
Okay, great. That's great, because that's something I really didn't have in my questions, the fact that you also have designer in-house, and I didn't know that that's one of the misconceptions. So that is super interesting to know. So is there any ideal stage or things that you need to have before starting talking to an outsourcing company? Because you mentioned that you're working with early stage startups, but also SMEs, and that you are more focusing on startup now, but you used to have a more wider portfolio of clients. So is there any stage or anything to have ready before starting talking to an agency like you?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So if I talk from a client's perspective, so a client, either a startup founder or founding team, or maybe a company who wants to build a new product, it really depends on where you are. There are outsourcing businesses that can help you at all stages. For Squid40, we excel, and our strength is at very early stage product, which means kind of almost feasibility and conception. But if you are a client who, and we deal with these also, but let's say you're a middle-sized client, or an enterprise that turns over somewhere between 10 and 20 million, you might want to start a new product, and you have to treat that from scratch, and it's around what you have. So you may have a team of designers who've already put together a validated product and then built wireframes. If that's the case, there is a business out there for you that can then take those wireframes, get the scope fully in line, and then build them out. For us, it's very early stage. We work with founders who have an idea. Sometimes that's the first thing we do. Often is a feasibility report. So that's a whole matrix of understanding of the product and where it's come from, and the founding team and all that kind of stuff, to try and ensure product market fit, which is one of the most important things. So, really, as a founder, whether it's funded, non-funded, etc., what you need is a fairly unique insight and idea that you feel has legs, and then you can go to the market and find an outsourcing company that suits you. You could be further advanced, or you could be earlier down the chain. For us, we take ideas that are very early. We spend a lot of time on ideation, validation, feasibility, and then only then do we move to prototyping, then on to product. So we start really early with people, and for that, really, people just need a really good idea, intent, and the right mindset to develop something which is meaningful and has value for not just themselves, but for a wider audience.
You just said that it's important to find an agency that suits you. I feel that it's really hard to navigate the different offers around, because you see lots of people doing this and that, and it's really hard to understand what you don't know, right? It's a difficulty for lots of founders to know what you don't know. And so what are the different advice, or what are the different points that you need to focus on depending on just to choose what agency to go for, or what to be looking for?
Yeah, sure. Good. Really valid, because people don't know how to select outsource, especially early stage founders or smaller businesses who've never done it, who might be building products for the first time. It's very difficult to select an outsourcing partner. Obviously cost is one thing, but cost should be an equal deciding factor and touch point to the output of that particular studio/agency. So if you don't have design in-house, and the people have design and UX design as well as UI design and a development team, then obviously that's going to be useful. The more you can keep everything in one place, the better. It's better to, in my opinion, and others will have their opinion, but in my opinion, as somebody who's run products for the last significant period of time, having stuff concentrated with a team that can do and transition between design and development and seamlessly understand what that looks like is a massive plus. And if you can go beyond that and past that, as we do, so before that would be feasibility, and beyond that would be MVP, beyond stage 1, stage 2, post-seed, marketing, etc. Having that all in one place is good. So the checklist is very personal, but I think people concentrate on cost, and it's not just about cost. It's about the services that agency provide. The communication level is super key. I mean, one of our mantras is around communication, and it should be for everyone. So, but that said, you're going to pay a cheaper price, if the communication is such that it's you give them the spec, you ship over the wireframes, and a company develops that and sends it back, then the cost will be low and the communication will be minimal, and that's what you need to get your product off the ground. It's probably unlikely, but maybe it is. So I think it's important to listen to as much kind of information about a short list of vendors. It's important to look close to home and probably further away. So there's Eastern Europe, but there's Rio, there's loads of places that you can find good outsourcing, and put your criteria down on the paper and find an agency that you feel has the right drivers. They're aligned with your product journey, because you may be an experienced product owner and you may know exactly what you want. You may have built really successful products for lots of people prior, and therefore you don't need some of the early stage validation. Then that's fine. It's going to be a cost and communication issue. It's not going to be an early stage issue. So it is difficult. There's a lot of information out there that you can listen to, podcasts, really good podcasts. But it is difficult selecting outsource, and that is one of the misnomers. It is difficult selecting outsource. There's a lot of people who sell coding as a thing, when it's not just about coding. It's very much not just about coding. So, but it's difficult. It is difficult. Just kind of, you've got to network, you've got to speak to as many people and go on the communication level as well as cost and quality.
There are also lots of founders that think about using the services of a studio to have their MVP started and off the ground, and to start approaching their target audience. So quite often they don't have the talents in-house to cover this work. But as they grow, I think there is a question that comes regularly is how do you balance having in-house developers and outsourcing part of your development? Like, is there a switch? Do you think that there is a moment where you need to really switch and think, okay, I've been using an agency to help me develop the first part of my MVP. Now I need to hire more people in-house to continue the work? Or do you think there is actually a way where you can have a mixed approach, keep part of your development outsourced, and have in the same time people who can work with the agency in-house?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it is possible to do both. We certainly work with clients who do both. And in fact, we like working with clients who have either a designer or development team, or, decision makers at that level, because it's about communication. I mean, Squid40, we set Squid40 up specifically because it's very, very difficult for founders and especially startups, but founders of early stage businesses or people who are starting new products, to set up and they can't afford to build world-class product teams. So to hire designers and developers, even on contract or freelance, wherever you are in the world, in kind of, especially in Western Europe, but to hire those people is super expensive, and people start their product journey on limited budgets. A lot of bootstrapping, people on grants, they're on early stage on loans, quite often friends and family round. People put 1,000 in here, 1,000 in there, and developing product is time consuming and expensive. So we set up Squid40 specifically because that is a difficult thing to do. So to have an outsourced product team that can get you to a certain stage, because the cost is manageable, but the value is high and the return on investment is very high around product, then that's great. Once you get to a certain stage, and again, it's very difficult to trigger that. We generally work with pre-seed or post-seed startups to the point where they're maybe, just before Series A or at Series A, where they're definitely at MVP. They've got an enhanced feature set, and they're making revenue, and they're looking at maybe second or third stage funding. At that point, it becomes prevalent to have your own team, because you need to value, the value of your product, the value of your team, the value of your business, the value of your product is definitely around the team and the IP, the knowledge and the agility you have to be able to change and iterate based on user feedback. But it's very possible to still have a successful product team in support, so that you can scale up and scale down. Because, give you a classic example, we work with a couple of businesses that have got internal teams, but when they want to build out a feature and they want to test it, it's much easier and better to do it with us, because we're cheaper, but we know the product because we were involved very early on in the feature sets. And then we can do the beta testing on various bits of new features. And then if those features are validated and they're going to production, they can go back into their core studio and build them. It's very, taking people off core product development, whether it's design or development as in tech, costs businesses a lot of money. So the answer to your question is, it's very possible to run them side by side, but there is a point when using an outsourced business probably becomes the second choice. But that's usually a funding and a product progression thing. You've got to MVP, you've got revenue, you're looking at maybe your second or third stage funding. You need to build your own team. You need to get that legacy in-house.
Does it also affect the workflow or the way you approach your product, or not at all? Or is it more a matter of management and people? Or is there something to take in consideration when you're just thinking about your product itself?
Building an internal team?
Yes.
You mean? Yeah, I think it shouldn't really affect your product, because, if you work with a product team, dare I say, like ours, that, kind of our mantra is side by side. We are your product team. You are in touch with us in real time, etc. Then, we are your team. So, and there's there's some good studios out there who work like that across Europe. That shouldn't affect your product development from a conception through to ideation, through to validation, through to product. But building teams is very difficult. It's very, very difficult. I spent a lot of my time helping founders, whether it's head of agency CEOs or startup founders, building successful teams. It's one of, if not the most difficult thing, as well as funding and ongoing funding and money raising, that drives products and businesses forwards. Building teams is a very difficult thing to do. So, sometimes it's easier to give that responsibility to a business like ours, and then it gives you more runway to be able to build the ideal team as and when you've got the funding and your product has got traction. So, but building the team in-house shouldn't affect your product view, no.
Okay. And well, you mentioned several times the funding aspect, and how the company is funded is going to affect how they're approaching the product development. So in terms of budget is super important for startups, especially early stage startups. And I'm wondering about the different type of pricing for agencies and for outsourcing studios. Is there any specific way agencies like to work, or do people approach the budgetization depending on the task, depending on the hour, or do you see lots of companies also looking at and going after equity?
Sure. Firstly, apologies. My
fine.
family is in the house and there's a bit of noise, so I've just moved location. So yeah, pricing is, a point of, there's a lot to discuss around pricing. We personally take a piece of equity of an early stage business if we're going to work with them to MVP and beyond. We run an incubator of 16 weeks to get product to MVP and technology. And once it's got to MVP and technology, we then we become an equity partner in that business, because for multiple reasons, but the main reason is partnership. Because if we're an equity partner in that business, and it's minimal equity as well, it's not huge amounts. It's the standard for our industry, if you are an equity partner, is between 5 and 10%, no more. So if anybody's asking you for more than 10%, it shouldn't really even be that. That's not the right level. But it's very much a partnership, mentality. Our product team is your product team, so we need to be able to operate and be, considerating, as your product team, the decision. So that's the equity level. It's not about, it's not about the money per se, because at these early stages that equity isn't really worth anything at all. Obviously, it's nice to be able to build businesses that might have a value where that equity level is, obviously then realizes a value, and that's great, and that is a business objective that we certainly look at. But the equity is more of a partnership based thing. In terms of actual costs, we never do equity only, because product is expensive. It costs it takes teams time and effort, and therefore teams have to be paid. You find that product studios sometimes have set fees for doing certain parts of the process, or they work on an hourly basis. Usually you can't productize, and when I say that, I mean you can't standardize the costs around product delivery, because most products are different, and many people are at different stages. So there can be set costs. But most costs in the industry, when it comes to outsourcing, are based on what we call a rate card, which of course you'll be very familiar with, Amandine, is literally a core set of costs that the agency or the studio or the product development studio or dev studio or whatever you're dealing with have, and they'll base their figures on that. But they'll probably, there's no industry standard around that. In fact, I've seen large disparity in that, especially in Eastern Europe and the US. There's a lot of people who charge very different rates just based on the fact that they've got extra year success or whatever. So it's maybe sound like a convoluted answer, but you can buy project, and that would be a fixed price. Then most support would be done on an hourly basis. It would be quite dangerous for most founders or early stage businesses to just do things on an hourly rate card, because you'll probably find that you spend a lot of money, because it takes a lot of time and effort to develop product. So project price is probably the most wise if you were an early stage founder looking at objectives and milestones. Does that answer your question?
It does, yes. I think it was actually extremely interesting to hear your point of view on that, because I think from the founder's perspective, you hear about people going through agencies and outsourcing the development, but you don't really know how it works. And I think it's important. It's a bit like when you're raising money, it's important to understand how the costs work. Like, you understand what people bill you, but you don't understand how things work on the other side. And like with venture capital, I think it's important to understand how the money works and how they are working internally, that how it affects you, to really understand how things work. So it's very interesting to hear your perspective on that, and the different aspect of it. Do you think that there is a different approach of pricing depending on the stage of the company? Let's say, as you said, very early stage companies, equity doesn't really worth much yet. But if a later stage company come, do they have more leverage because they are later stage in terms of the equity, or not at all? It's just a fixed thing in this industry.
Yeah, well, undoubtedly, a later stage company or maybe a corporate who is starting a new product will have higher leverage. I mean, for us, for instance, at Squid40, we'll work with for us, it's about new product. So it will work with other companies that are starting new products, but they're starting that as if it was a startup. So it's a conception through to an MVP. The point is that that's a new development process, but maybe they are part of a larger company that has a market cap, and therefore asking for equity is going to be not feasible, because they're not going to give you equity in that, because they're already a seasoned company, etc. I think that's probably not so common. Mostly those types of businesses. I mean, we actually do have a couple of relationships with them. With types of companies like that, they generally are prepared to pay a higher rate for the product, for the product cycle, so design and development. and you're going to be hard, they're going to be hard stretched to give you equity in that. We generally don't do any product development work now unless we've got some kind of equity, because it just allows us to be a true partner. So costing wise, and if I think a lot of agencies I've seen, they reduce their costs if they've got an equity. We certainly did that at the beginning. We certainly said if we're an equity partner, we can charge you a slightly lesser rate on the longer term, because it shows that you've committed to us, and we'll show commitment to you. But yes, companies with bigger budgets, slightly further down the process, they will have leverage on that, because obviously of all the aforementioned. But that's they usually go to a different type of agency anyway, if I'm honest.
Okay.
Yeah,
that makes sense. So now, well, you're based at home. I am at home too. Everyone is at home, and the situation is not the usual working from home. So there are lots of uncertainties. Lots of people have cut their hiring plans, and I'm wondering if you've seen any effect on how people approach products, or any changes for your client strategy when it comes to building their own product. Did they have any sudden change, or did they freeze any of their current project? Have you seen any changes from your client's perspective?
Yeah, obviously a very relevant and pertinent question for the slightly weird and strange, dangerous times we're in. The long short of it, short answer to the possibly very long question and context is, we have seen change, and we understand there is change. There is a mindset change for clients, and that is instantly around risk adversity and understanding what investment, what investments look like. Startups have been, this is your world, of course, as much as mine. They're very, they were very worried about this, and I actually published an article on Medium, does COVID-19 mean stop for startups? And, I think people were worried and are worried still, quite rightly, because, it's a troubling time. We've actually seen an uptick, if I'm honest, and I think that's to do with our mentality that we've been putting out there, because, this is an amazing, very strange and weird time, but an amazing time for early stage businesses, because there is a huge captive audience at home. There are a bunch of very wealthy individual investors, angels, as well as syndicates, as well as people who run funds and ventures, who are sitting at home with more time, more time to consume information, more time to look at ideas and options, and we certainly, from a Squid40 perspective, I'm lucky enough to be working with some really amazingly talented people in our team, but also some external strategic opportunities. And this is a time which will define the next 5 to 10 years of the generation that currently is working, and the generation behind that. And there is going to be there's going to be a huge push on exponential technology, and how that will help and forge solutions for the problems that we've encountered during this specific period, that we'll carry on encountering. So I think the mentality that we've put across, certainly my role as the CEO and strategic advisor and driver for the company, has been, now is the time to validate. There is a huge audience at home. We've extended our validation and our test bed. There's lots of people who are crying out to look at great products and hear about it. It's a great time for investors to hear about it. So I think the initial feeling was, oh my God, what's going to happen? Oh my word, does my startup die? And does it stay stagnant? And the answer to that, from our perspective, was no, absolutely not. This is a time to forge forward. And we've seen a lot of people, very much bolt on to the feeling that we have, which is, exponential technology. When people come out of this period, there is going to be a lot of questions asked about, socioeconomic problems. Why am I at risk with my house? Why can't I cancel my insurance and turn it on and off when I need to? Why can't I, switch accounts? Why can't I move money internationally? Why can't I view this stuff that I need to on my website because it comes from another country? There's a bunch of questions that's going to be posed, and those questions will be solved by new and early stage growth technology companies. So it's a good time for that. And so it was kind of like an initial stop and then very much a curve for us. And I think that I see that now as a thing. It's not unique in our sense. It's a thing. And I think you and I discussed that maybe that was something you were seeing too.
I completely agree with you, and I like the fact that you are think things like me in a very positive way, thinking, okay, this situation is really bad for everyone, and raise lots of very difficult questions for founders and for everyone else. But at the end, it's also a good moment to think about what to do better and what to improve and the future products. So we have a few questions from Lumjacker on the chat who ask about the number of members you have on your team in your company, and also the clients you get from your website for your company. So I guess the question from that is actually also about, how you get your client, which is also one of my questions. So I think maybe we can start with the number of people part of your company, and then we can talk about attracting clients to your company.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So we're currently 27, and by the end of this month we'll be 29. And we have ongoing headcount. We're growing, I'm happy to say, in design, development, and QA operations. So project management. We're growing, and we have got a new office that we're meant to be moving into in June the 1st, and some very, very cool, big, exciting, strategic partnership opportunities, which would see really great cutting edge technology. So yeah, we're growing, but we're about 29 at the moment.
Okay. And in terms of acquiring clients, so you want an agency, so I guess you're growing organically. The number of projects you get helps you grow the number of members in your team. But also there are lots of agencies, and I guess everyone who is just on LinkedIn or active on any social media have received so many spam messages about people in all the countries possible, just offering development services. So how do you stand out from the crowd, and how do you get your client? Is word of mouth a huge thing?
Yeah, it is a huge thing. Yeah. So I too see so much LinkedIn spam, especially. I get it. I understand why people are doing it. They need clients, and it's a tough time, but we almost exclusively at the moment get our work through referral. So people come to us, they see the website, they see that we are fully aligned and partnered and aligned to early stage businesses internationally. So we're HQ'd in London. We're delivered from Romania. I live in Romania, as does my business partner. Spends a lot of time here and between London. And we work with startups and early stage businesses across the world. So most of it comes from that. I'm a mentor at a few places, the Founders Institute, L Marks, Hatch, and that proves invaluable when it comes to people understanding how we do what we do, which is very side by side. It's very early stage. It's very working with founders and accelerating them from very early stages through to product. We don't get anything through. Well, we do get some things through the website. We get some queries, but most of it is referral and word of mouth. But that's changing. We're becoming a little bit more active in that because we're scaling the business. So we're looking to run more of our incubator programs, which are 16-week product incubators. And so therefore I'm going to have to kind of heighten the marketing. But yeah, most of it is word of mouth and through my network and mentoring and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I will add to that I'm active in many online communities, and every time I've seen someone looking for an agency or partner to outsource some of their development, they always ask founders if they know anyone, but if they have worked with anyone, rather than asking if anyone just offers the kind of services, because they want to hear from someone who worked with the company before, and more like hearing some region of experience more than just selling proposition. We have a question from the show who asked about what you think about no-code solution for a quick MVP.
What's the best solution for a quick MVP?
But more about what you think about the no code solution, all the trend around using some really short tools that doesn't require any
Oh,
coding
sorry.
experience.
Yeah, sorry. So no code. Sorry,
Yes.
Amandine. Yeah. We are a massive exponent of no code MVP. We actually call it MVPR, minimum viable prototype. Our whole 16-week program is run on the fact that you can have a feasibility piece and then move from validation through to proof of concept through to a prototype and have product market fit without having coded a single thing. Getting to getting code involved in products takes you to MVP, and it costs money, it takes time, and it's where a lot of people make mistakes and they spend a lot of money. They have to go back and change that. So it's whoever asked that question, it's a great question, and you can do a lot with high fidelity design. There's a bunch of great tools out there now which allow you to build prototypes that you can test, validate, ideate, reiterate, etc., and then only move to tech when you've got a feature set and a product market fit, which you know that people are going to adopt. So we're a massive fan of that, and we do that for every early stage business. We do not do code or legacy code unless we've gone through a prototyping stage first. So yeah, we really believe that is the future for very quick, rapid release.
Okay, that's great. I have tried a few solutions myself, and I've always have been very frustrated. But I guess once you know the tools really well, you can do something that works and that fits what you need. And we have,
Yeah.
yeah,
There's no substitute for a great designer using the tool to make the prototype. But a lot of
right.
these things are getting much more user intuitive, so that founders can actually get that first bit done. But yeah, there's so many great tools out there: Adobe XD, Figma. There's lots that you can play around with and build stuff.
So you mentioned having good developers and designers in-house in your company, and Lumjacker is asking about how do you hire good developers or designers, and I guess also what's your criteria to evaluate designers and developers you get into your team?
Yeah, good. So we've spent a lot of time and effort building a very strong cultural DNA. The thing that it kind of differentiates us, I think, above everybody is that we're a true side-by-side product house. We are your team. Our team is able to relate to founders, work with them at the kind of communication level that they would expect from an internal team. And the way we've done that is by building a very strong culture. And people come and join us because they know they've got access to really great founders with really great ideas, net positive and kind of sustainable ideas that make an impact for a wider audience. So, people are coming to us. I'm happy to say my background is building teams and cultures. People are actually coming to us. We're not having to go out so much and look for those people. Once you start building something which is around collaboration, empathy, self-accountability and partnership and those things, and you're actually living that, and it's actually being done, and there are clients that are willing to say, these guys, that's how they work. Word gets around and people want to work for places like that. And certainly where we are in Romania, we're on a steep curve of progression here, and it's a very, very strong curve of technology, and design is becoming also, design and innovation is on a very strong curve as well. But it's still not where a lot of Western Europe is. So people are still clambering for really progressive workplaces and progressive places to touch great projects. So, how do we hire those people? We focus very strongly on our team. They come first. Our team is the client's team, and we build really stellar culture. And we put those people first, and they are truly on a journey, and that word gets out. And we do a lot of talking. We do a lot of community work. We try to do talks in community. We try and hire interns and talk at places like CX Dev Talks and CX Design, all that kind of stuff. But you've got to start with your people in that chain first, and then they'll start coming to you. Because building teams, and as I said earlier, is the most difficult thing. And once you've got that wheel in motion, things become easier.
In terms of your own experience building Squid40 itself, Is there any specificities about building a studio or any challenges that you've been facing just growing this company?
Yeah, absolutely. Scaling quickly, rapidly. We went kind of from six or seven people to over 20 in a year, or less than a year, maybe 9 months. It's the people issues. Even though I've got experience and I've got a great leadership team that helped me do that, people, it's difficult. It's a difficult thing, and so growing and scaling quickly, having everybody fit in, and we focus on hiring mindsets over skill sets. That takes time. It takes investment. It takes effort. But plus, I think the biggest challenge has been around operational frameworks and procedures. As we've grown and changed and worked with different stages of business, we've offboarded legacy clients because we've understood that expectation management is very difficult. So having a framework and an operational framework and process that works for the client as well as it does internally is a very difficult thing at early stages to get right. And that just comes from iteration and listening to your clients and listening to your team and having a very open mind to that, a collaboration mind, because it's really difficult to get framework and process like that, especially when you're scaling fast. But you need it. You need to have controllables. You need to have milestones. You need to have stuff that you can see and feel to be able to measure and get better. So I think that's been the biggest challenge, kind of keeping up on the ops and procedure side.
Yes, definitely. And you mentioned earlier some podcasts. You mentioned also that you wrote some articles on Medium. Is there any specific resources that you have found extremely helpful, or if anyone wants to maybe learn more about not just what you do, but this field, is there any specific resources that you enjoy and you'd recommend?
Good question. I think I read a lot of kind of business and mindset improvement stuff. So John Collins, Tim Ferriss, all the usual names. There's a great podcast called the Agency Podcast. I've forgotten the guy that does it now, American guy who has good agency owners, and they address different topics, which I listen to. I think I'm just trying to think specific. We've got so much going on that I haven't been as active in reading and all that kind of stuff. Listening, most of it now. I listen to podcasts to relax, so kind of comedy podcasts. But the Agency Podcast is really good. Brent Weaver, his name is Brent Weaver. The Agency Podcast, that's really, really good to get an insight into successful agencies and studios. I think I'm a massive exponent of, can't do it so much at the moment, but meetups, networking, online communities, forums, podcasts like this, anything like this that's, easily consumable. You've got to make an extra hour every couple of days just to find that information and consume it, especially as a founder or a business owner. I'm a relatively young CEO of a growing business. I think there's so much out there that you can consume. It's just about compartmentalizing it and making sure you actually do it. Like, don't just write it down, like literally take the time out to do it when you're running, walking, after you've put the kids to bed, whatever it is, because there's a lot of stuff. So there's Digital Minimalism by Cal Newman is a great thing that I've looked at recently. There's a bunch of things. If I think of any others in structure, Amandine, I'll send you a message so you can put it out there.
I tried to take notes of everything you just said, but I think I will need to re-listen to this part of the interview to make sure I put in the description of the video all the different links. I will certainly miss some of them. So I know that you have to leave soon. I just have one last question from the chat from Lumjacker. So Lumjacker asks, do you get e-commerce website clients? If yes, then how do you create e-commerce sites? Do you make use of Shopify or WordPress, or do you guys create it from scratch? So I think that last part of the question is the key part of the question. Knowing when you have e-commerce or specific project, do you use tools that are existing, like Shopify, that facilitate the work, or do you have to create everything from scratch?
So good question from an e-commerce perspective there. We personally, Squid40, we've done it with everything. We build WordPress sites, we build Shopify sites, we build bespoke sites, and you can build huge e-commerce sites with JavaScript technology, React at the front end, and Arango or Mongo or AWS databases at the back end. It depends on the size of the product. Okay. The short answer to, if you are an early stage business and you are testing the water and you want to build a very simple e-commerce site that does, that isn't really complex, then absolutely standard tools like WordPress with plugins for payment stuff like Stripe and all that will work and will scale to a really decent point. You can be running fairly sizable e-commerce shops with standard framework stuff like Shopify and WordPress. There's no need to go unique and bespoke, which will cost you more money. There's no real requirement to do that early on unless you know that your database, your thing is going to be huge with massive analytics and data. So keep it simple. We definitely work with those as well. It's key to be able to work. You've got to be tech agnostic in my world. You've got to be solutions led. You've got to listen to what the client requirement is and suggest what's correct for them. Steering them down a path which makes it easier for you. That's not a thing anymore. It's about client requirement and being solution led. So the answer is yes, you can definitely do good stuff with stuff like Shopify and WordPress. Absolutely.
So for you, the way you choose the technology you're going to use depends on the client requirement, or is it more you advising the company, depending on the stage, what you should go for?
Well, usually we get involved with businesses at a very early stage. So we'll have done the ideation, the brand conception. We'll have probably even built the whole brand, including the UX design, the UI design, etc. And so we'll advise very much on the best way to do that. But it's based on client requirement. If it's a simple marketplace app, and you need to have it reflective on the web as well, then we'll look at the most simple technology to do that, which allows for scale. We'll speak to the founder, and if they clearly are looking to get rounds and rounds of money, then the idea is that they can change that in the future. And how do they change that with the less impact? So we're very much, it's very, very client led and solutions led. But our job is to advise from the beginning. So, again, some people go to bigger agencies, they have a format, they have something which works, and deploying like that is a different set, set of criteria. But for us, it's about defining the scope, understanding what the client, not just what they think they need, but what they actually need, which can often be a lot less, and building it incrementally so that they have control from a budget and a scale perspective.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, James. Before we wrap up, because I know you have to go, where can we find you online? So you have your website, squid40.com.
Absolutely. Yeah, squid40.com. Mostly you'll find me on LinkedIn, James Murphy. And I do have a Facebook handle, James M. Murphy, for Squid40. My team are generally in control of all of that kind of stuff because they're much better at it than me. But yeah, the main two things are LinkedIn, James Murphy, and squid40.com. Feel free to send an email, get in touch, and if we can help or answer any questions, we'll be happy to.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to stay on the stream. I'm going to have a small break, a 1 minute break to just grab more coffee or just water, and I'll be back. So everyone don't go anywhere. I'll also answer the show questions later on. But James, huge thanks for joining me on the stream. It was super interesting. The video of today will be available certainly on Monday. I'll do more promotion online and put the link somewhere. But huge thanks to answer all my questions and the questions on the chat. I wish you a fantastic weekend, James, and I'm sure we'll be in touch very soon.
Okay, thank you, Amandine. Thanks a lot for having us on, and
thanks.
Stay safe.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.